Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islamic Awakening with me, Reza Kazim. Many Western media outlets have a history of generating anti-Muslim hatred through a negative portrayal of Muslims. Many Muslims internalize this unrelenting negative narrative and feel that the blame lies on Muslim actions.
The media occupies a pivotal role in society. Representations of Muslims and Islam in the media have been of considerable debate and discussion. Islam has been consistently portrayed by the global media as a violent-prone religion that is diametrically opposed to the West, and the portrayal of Muslims has been largely negative. This week we're asking, how can Muslims work with the media to improve their image?
To be honest, I believe Muslims in general should be contributing in the community's life to reflect the real image of Islam, showing people the real image of Islam in all different ways of life, basically.
Well, by speaking the truth about Islam, to be honest with you, don't believe everything you see on the media, and really explain what Islam actually means, which it actually means peace.
For Muslims, I think, to gain more positive media exposure, the only thing we can think about to do is to just make people more aware, get them more educated, to do more documentaries about Islam itself, and just try and get more mass awareness that way, I think.
To address these and other issues, we have our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan. Welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. I wanted to start off by asking, why do Muslims feel that the negative portrayal of Muslims, the blame for it lies on the Muslims themselves?
I think that first there is something which has to be understood in the whole discussion about Islamophobia. Is that first we are dealing with media, we are dealing with politicians, we are dealing with systems and ideologies that are creating the image of Muslims and portraying Muslims in a very negative way. So this is not new, this is very old, is as old as the first relationship between tribes and other tribes and Muslims, and then through Orientalism and colonization. So some of the Muslims, they know and they are feeling and they experience within the community, among Muslims, this self-criticism that we have, and then at the end they say, look, with what we are doing, this is normal for the people to think negatively about us. And we have to distinguish between things that are we have to be critical about what Muslims are doing, because some Muslims are behaving and acting in a very negative way, and the ideology and the system that we have to understand from within, which has to do with this power struggle, which has to do with cultural colonization, and also portraying the other and creating the Muslim as the other, with all the discussion that we have with essentializing Islam.
With regards to that, some of the things that you're saying, that when some Muslims do some things that are bad or whatever, then they become the focal point around this. So that in itself surely doesn't justify the negative structural issues that are there.
Yes, exactly. So that's a very important point, is that when you are in a position of power, the powerful or dominant narrative is, if anybody is doing something, you will have the description of this act and saying such and such was done by an individual, but you are not essentializing. It's not one white or one black or one Christian has done this, so Christianity has to be blamed. So essentializing is exactly coming from this ideology, which is racism. And racism is all about essentializing. Is that you have a black man and you have a Latinos, for example, in the narrative that we have today in the States, say, oh, all the Latin American people are like this, all the African American are like this, or the black people are like this. So from where we are, the acknowledgement that some Muslims are behaving in the wrong way, this we should not deny that, and we have to be very critical with this. It's coming from our own tradition. Help your brother when he's right or wrong. How are you going to help him when he's wrong? By preventing him from doing wrong. So this is the hadith of the Prophet, the prophetic tradition. On the other side, we should completely deconstruct this essentializing coming from one anecdote and one situation to generalizing this to all the Muslims, and understanding that there is a narrative, there is an ideology behind the whole process that we as human beings, intellectuals, scholars or citizens, we have to understand and to criticize.
Well, I'm going to come back to those points later on in this program, but I want to move on slightly to how can Western media be influenced to stop generating anti-Muslim hatred?
So there are many things that have to be first. You know, even after September the 11th in the States and all the violent acts and attacks that we had, what is happening in the Muslim majority countries today in the Middle East, you have the way the media and the journalists are covering all the stories. And this is where the best that we can hope is for them to get more knowledge about the situation. The more you enter into the complexity of the political situation, for example, in the Middle East, and it's very complicated, this is where you get a sense of nuance, and you stop generalizing and understand that you have Muslims and trends, and you have to be very cautious not to generalize. On the other side, we as Western Muslims now, we have to be quite clear. We cannot just sit down and blame the media and blame the world. We have to be involved in the discussion. We need to have journalists. We need to have people and our own also medias and channels where in the discussion we bring about another image, another understanding, another narrative. We have to be involved in literature, we have to be involved in within academia, and we have to be involved within the media to be able to say, okay, look, that's not the right way to look at this issue and to complexify the reality. The point with Islamophobia is always to simplify the other. This is racism, is you are doing this because you are black, because you are Muslim, because you are a Jew. No, that's not the way. So we have to be involved in this in a scholarly way and in a civil way.
One of the things, as you mentioned, about Muslims getting into journalism and the media, etc., there are examples of Muslims in Western mainstream media and so on. But that hasn't really changed the image. If anything, they've become part of that system, and it hasn't really, apart from one or two maybe superficial examples or one or two examples, hasn't really influenced the general trend of where that whole thing is actually going. So even that hasn't worked. Really.
Yes, you are right, but it's a step. I think that it's very powerful. It's a system. It's not only just the people who are writing in the newspaper or presenting or I don't know, a program on TV. It's the whole system. So you have here to be very, very involved in this by trying to reach also position where you can decide, you can frame something, and this is where it takes time. So we need at the same time to work at different levels within the mainstream media, in the alternative media, internet. Now it's very powerful what you can get through the social medias. It's very important. We have to be involved everywhere. And still, even though the mainstream media are spreading around a negative image of Islam, the more we are involved in society, I'm used to say to every single Muslim, you are a media. You are a media between the Islamic message and the people around you. So you need to be a witness. You need to get this image and to inform the people around you. We have to be involved in our society. So this is why any Islamic discourse telling us Muslims, you have to isolate yourself from this kuffar, this non-believers, this people who are judging, are doing exactly the opposite of what should be done.
But here we're talking about people who feel that, okay, the media in itself, it needs to be changed. Some people feel that, okay, by influencing, by doing this on an individual level is all well and good, but trying to do this at a systemic level is quite problematic. And sometimes Muslims feel, well, actually, if we work hard enough, if we try hard enough, the media is going to change. Are they really going to change?
I think that yes and no. You know, it's the whole system, and it's very difficult. You have the people, you know, we don't have political pressure on media, but we have financial pressure. The owners of the media, it's, you know, we know some of these big names that are behind, and you can see from one country to another, it's exactly the same narrative, exactly the same stories, exactly the same portrayal of Muslims. We know that this is, so it's very powerful. This is not going to change, but we also need to understand that on the long run, our presence in the West and the way we also can influence the public opinion. Look on Palestine, for example. In the 70s, 67% or 73% of the Europeans were supporting Israel blindly, or the Zionist entity. What we have today, 67% of Europeans are supporting Palestinians. So things could change if we are doing the job within the society and through the media, by being present, by being actors, by being agents.
But that's not because of the media, that's despite the media. There is a perception of the particular issue that you're talking about that's come about. It's not because, you know, suddenly, I mean, the BBC is, there are, you know, analysis has been done of the BBC, for example, where they've been shown to be biased against the Palestinians.
Yeah, you're right. It's against the mainstream trends that we have within the media. But this is exactly the point, that you cannot, on the long run, have media working against the mainstream within the society. At one point you can frame, you can shape, you can influence, you can inform, but at one point you have to deal with the people you have with you. And this is why we have to understand that it's a two-way process. In some of the, for example, European issues, when it came to the Constitution, the media were supporting signing the Constitution, and the people on the ground were working. At the end, the people won, and the media lost. So we also have to get it right in our way of influencing people around us.
Recently, to come back to a point that you were discussing earlier, recently we've had the situation of white men in positions of power having been accused and convicted of paedophilia. But that has not been made out to be normative of white men. Why is this, when there is someone, a Muslim, who does something that is wrong, that is sensationalized into becoming normative of all Muslims?
Because this is exactly the intrinsic logic of what we are talking about. When you are in a position of power and you want to portray the other and to problematize his or her presence, you see, what you are doing is representing all the people. The white people in position of power did this with the black people, whereas under colonization, this is the way things were done. So there are two things here that are visible in this logic, in this sophisticated way of dealing with the other. First is the simplification of the other. So I'm complex, we are simple. So among you there are good and bad. Good Muslims, bad Muslims. Good Muslims are the people who are supporting us. Bad Muslims are all the people who are resisting us. And then anyone who is doing something that could help us to portray the bad Muslims, this is it. So we go from one to generalizing this. So this is something that we know. It's not new in history. The second thing, which is also very important in this situation, is to put you in a position of defensive. So to be on the defensive. And this is exactly what you said at the beginning of the program, is that many Muslims are apologizing and they say, oh, it should be right because this is said everywhere. So the fact that this is repeated and this is imposed onto us, we internalize this. So there is here something which is a process that we have to understand in the way simplification is going against complexity of the other, and second, reduction of the other to one behavior. And this is where the only people who can change this are people who understand that they are not the object of the perception of the other, but they are the subject of their own history. So they take this and say, I'm not going to accept you reducing me to the image you want to create out of your own representation.
It's interesting, a lot of interesting points, and we'll come back to one or two points that you've made. We do like to keep this show as interactive as possible and really value your opinion. Here is what you sent us today.
This week we asked, how can Muslims improve their image in the media? A Eunice from the UK says, Muslims are being demonised by the media. It is high time the media treated Muslims fairly. In the media, using Islam or Muslims as descriptive terms when referring to criminals remains all too common, even in cases where faith has little or nothing to do with a crime. We have to use our media to counter this image. And Hassan from Germany says, we need more Muslim people working in the media, and we should use our own media to actively challenge the negative portrayals. We need to provide a platform for Muslims so they can communicate for themselves and offer new ways of thinking. And that's all the comments we have for this week. Don't forget to leave your views on our Facebook and Twitter page.
One of the things that's going on within this, that we've got the situation that non-Western media, in particular Muslim media outlets, adopt the references that are the narrative in Western media. So, for example, in the current situation, we've got the words Islamic State being used over and over again. Then they supposedly put a nuance on it saying so-called Islamic State, ISIL and so on, but they love repeating that word. When actually, and why do Muslim media outlets use those terms, carry on, for example, rather than using Daesh? And there are many other examples of this type
Yes,
around.
lots of examples, and this is where, once again, images are created out of the words that we are using, the terminology. And if you use the words, you are in a position of power. This is what Foucault, the French philosopher, was saying, is that power, language is power. And we know that within the media, this is something which is very important. When, for example, in Palestine, they killed the fathers and the boy, they said, we lost the struggle or the battle of images, understanding that there is a war there when it comes to media. So this is where we have, once again, it's upstream from all what we are talking about here, is even the terminology. Who is using the words? For example, the way in the mainstream media we are talking about jihad as a holy war, that's completely wrong. And some of the Muslims are repeating this, and even in so-called media coming from the Middle East or coming from Muslim majority countries, they are doing exactly the same. So they are losing the battle by accepting the terminology before talking about the issues. And we have here to be very clear, there are steps. First, what are the words you are using? For example, a very important word that you have everywhere now, the war on terror. Who is defining terror? Who is defining terrorism? There is no official, institutionalized definition of terror, and it's everywhere in the media. And you have professors within university or in the media, analysts that are using terror everywhere. But when it comes from state, for example, with what is happening in Palestine, it's as if we are talking about the legitimate defense of a state. That's completely, nonsense. So we have to be clear on the terminology. We have to be clear on history, because there is something which is also very important. In Islamophobia, it's as if you don't have history. So, for example, if we have unrest in suburbs, for example, in France or in Germany or in the States, Muslims, it's culturalized, it's Islamized. But what about the history? What about the way you treated the people? What about social injustice? What about discrimination? No, that has nothing to do. So less politics for more ideology, and this is where we are trapped. And by the way, it's not only Muslims. There are lots of citizens. When we talk like this, many citizens would understand exactly what I'm saying, because this is what we are facing in many issues when it comes to environment, when it comes to what the leftists were saying when they were criticizing the global economy. It's always portraying, these are a bunch of extremists, and this is what they want. They are against, the liberal democracy. They are playing with words, and we are lost without a direction.
But it persists. People recognize it. People use it. How do you change what's going on? Because that's the thing that needs to be done. Because supposedly the Muslim media outlets, for example, or non-Western media outlets, which are against the white power structure, if you like, have that power. Yeah. To use different words. Why isn't that done?
It's a long-run process, and we need to be equipped to do that. But there is something which, once again, it's important. Edward Said once was saying, it's not a clash of civilizations, it's a clash of ignorance. And I responded to this by saying, no, it's deeper than that even. It's a clash of perceptions. A clash of perception, this is from where you have Islamophobia, that it's a perception of the other. When we talk about perceptions, we need to know what are the means that are shaping perceptions. Language, that's very important. history, it's important, and interaction. This is where we have to work. We have to work on the terminology, what we were saying. We have to talk about the history, so to put things into context. That's very important, because what is happening now, for example, in the Middle East is not coming from nowhere, and the West was involved in this. And second is also something which has to do with interaction. So where are we in the picture? Not to let the people talk about ourselves, but we have to talk on our own behalf. We have to talk for ourselves. And this is something that it's very important. It's going to be a long process. But what I can tell you that over the last 2 generations, 50 years of Muslims in the West, things are moving. So it's going to be very difficult. And we Muslims, we should understand that we have to put some money, not only in mosques, not only in structures, but in education, in media, in writing, in universities. This is what we are doing. We don't understand. We think that we are going to succeed by just being present and to pray. To pray is the right thing to do. To think comes with it.
Moving on from that, some people say that if the Takfiris, the Daesh, didn't do what they do, then the Muslims wouldn't have the portrayal, the negative portrayal that they're having currently. No. How would you?
No, that's very simplistic, because we have even Muslims saying in the West, we have to be invisible. Be less Muslims, you have to be going to be more acceptable. That's completely wrong. That's deeper than that. Even if you succeed by being less visible, you are more dangerous. And then it's exactly what is going to happen there. By the way, we have to ask ourselves, in which way all these trends were not also manufactured in a way that is creating this negative perception. So what happened around us in the West, what is happening with all these controversies that are coming, is to create an atmosphere, is to keep it around, to nurture this negative image. So if it wouldn't be this, it would be anything else. So once again, we as Muslims, we have to be critical towards violent extremism, but we should not be ideologically naive. We should understand that this is used once again to nurture something which is already there. Much before Daesh in the Middle Ages, we had exactly the same thing. So it's not coming now, it's just new means for an old story. That's it. A new means for an old story portraying the others in a negative way.
And with regards to this, with this simplification of what's actually going on, clearly a deeper analysis, a more nuanced analysis is actually required. Mainstream media isn't going to provide that. Are there alternatives that are being put forward, and how should they be put forward?
Yes, they are. Of course, what we have now, and on the long run, it's going to be very challenging in the West for those people who want to simplify everything, is that we have now a second, third generation of people in universities. We have them here, we have them in Muslim majority countries. So we have more and more educated people. The second thing which is important is you shape perceptions by interacting with people. And this is also something which is very important when the people know you. Do you know that with the young generation, for example, between 18 and 25 in all the Western countries, the fact that they are interacting with fellow Muslim citizens is changing their perception? That's very important, because you don't create or shape perceptions only through books. It's daily life, it's interaction. So we have to think about many ways and many strategies, knowing that it's going to be a long process, that we have to be very much committed to do something about it, and we should stop being naive about what is done. And there is one point that I want to add here. Respect the fear of the people around you, because there are legitimate fears, and we have to respond to this. But don't confuse their fear with the political games that are done by leaders that are playing with this fear in order to stigmatize Muslims.
Perhaps a controversial point to end on, but thank you very much. The media's onslaught on Muslims and Islam is a supertanker which has no intention of changing course. And even if it did, like a supertanker, it would take a long time to do so. Also, based on the history of demonization of others, it is not good enough for the media spotlight to demonize some other community, but in fact to stop this malevolent practice altogether, to make the media space safe for the whole community. The time is up for today's topic. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan
So much.
for his views on this topic, and of course all of you at home for watching. Goodbye until the next time and another edition of Islamic Awakening.